Hello and welcome to this week's track guide. This week we are in Suzuka, Japan. First of all, some quick facts. We have 18 turns. The circuit is 5.8 kilometers long. And of course, you have the famous sections of the Suzuka S's. Techno 1 and 2 and 130 are also Spoon Corner, being a favorite of mine. We have one DRS zone. The detection point is just before the chicane, and the DRS is on the start-finish straight. The tires available are the C3, C2, C1 tire, C3 being the softest, C1 being the hardest. So you just need to be really careful with those tires because it's very easy to heat up your tires, especially in the S section, because your tires are going to be put under a lot of stress, especially if you use a high downforce setup like mine. You should also train the wet because it's also likely that there is going to be rain, so just make sure to have a wet setup on your backhand. Just like every week, I'm going to show you my hot lap, then after that we're going to talk about it, and at the end I'm going to show you my setup. So here you in a second. As you are starting your lap, you want to take the farthest distance between you and the finish line. Though on Suzuka, it's not really that important. What's more important is that you're really smooth out of the last chicane. Because if you take the widest line, you're going to scrub off a lot of speed, so you're actually going to lose time. When you're obviously finishing the lap, as you saw, you want to take the shortest line as possible. On Suzuka, especially after Suzuka bump has gone after F1 2019, it's really, really important and really easy to do. And yeah, we're going to cover that at the end of the lap. As we have opened the arrows from the start finish straight, we're going down to turn 1 and turn 2. Turn 1 is completely flat, but for turn 2 you would want to look out for this right hand side curb. Just before that ends, you want to go ahead and fully brake, then trail brake into this corner. Really important to play with your brakes in this corner. You can go down to third gear for a bit more extra rotation. Just completely miss the curb on the inside, get as close to the curb as possible without actually touching it, because if you do touch that curb, you're going to send out really, really wide. So just make sure not to do that. As we're coming in the apex, late apex for this corner as well, go up to fourth gear. Then as you can right here, the racing line is very easily recognizable right here, but not as much further down the track. That means we have a small hill right here. So before that small hill, because you're coming out of a right-hand side turn, your rear is going to, or your weight of the car is going to be very on the cusp of spinning out. So just make sure to go 75-80% just before that hill. And as you spin up your car, go full throttle, fifth gear. Then for the S, it's really important to be as close to actually spinning out as possible without spinning out. You can play with the differential to help you a bit with that. For the first part right here, go down to 6 gear, get a small lift so you can set yourself up better for turn 4. Then don't clip that curb at all, as you are going into this right-hander. Really throw your car in. The rear is going to be a bit unstable, but again, with the differential, you can actually make it work. Don't touch that curb. Again, get as close as possible. Keep it in fifth throughout the section right here. Get really on the throttle. Then again, it's a small lift. The only real curb that you can ride is the left hand side one, but only just a tiny bit, because again, the weight of your car is going to get pretty upset if you ride it too much. So just make sure to ride it a tiny bit. It gives you a bit more rotation and helps you set up for turn 6. Then for turn 6, I didn't do right here. Keep it in 5th. I kept it in 4th because I wanted a bit more extra rotation, which led me to understeering actually. So because I went too early on the throttle. So you want to be in 5th throughout this right-hander. Go for a late apex, which I completely missed in this example on this lap, which cost me like half a tenth. Then for Dunlop, it's really important to go as far right as possible for the actual corner. Then steer in. Don't do too many steering inputs. You can see I ease off the steering when I'm inside the corner. I do most of the steering before the corner, and then as I come in, don't touch the curb, by the way, on the left hand side. And as I come in, just ease off the steering, because your rear is going to be really, really happy spinning out. It's really hard to get this corner right flat out, even on quali trim. So for the race, you obviously would need to lift, but the same applies. You want to have as much of a wide entry as possible to actually have your car straight as long as straight as possible throughout the whole corner, so your rear doesn't step out. Also, a thing I forgot to mention for the S's, you can see they are all on cam corners, so you want to stay as close as possible to the inside for all of those S's. This one isn't on cambered, but still again, go late apex. Then Dunlop getting that flat, then coming down to Degner 1. For Degner 1, you want to just turn in after the 50 meter pot. You want to upshift a bit earlier than I did. Again, you want, just like Dunlop, you want to get the most amount of steering before the actual corner. Cut as much curb as possible on here. Again, you can see ease off a tiny bit from the steering, just to make sure the car actually doesn't step out with a tiny lift, but you can make it flat out. I've done it a couple of times. Then you can use this runoff right side. Just make sure not to run too wide to get an invalidation or warning in the race. Just 10 meters before that curb ends, you will want to brake down to 3rd gear. Again, this corner is very heavily on cambered. Just don't touch that curb as well. The curbs on Suzuka, except for the last chicane, are pretty much a taboo. So just stay clear of them. Go 3rd. As you're coming off the corner, go into 4th. You're going uphill, so your rear is going to be very happy to step out. You have a bit of a bad weight transfer. Then just get your car straight. You want to use this little runoff again. Don't go out too wide, because you can invalidate or get a warning, which is quite common in a race, especially on high fuel. Then keep your car straight as possible. Then coming to the hairpin, this little right king obviously completely flat, but soon as that curve on the right hand side ends, you want to keep as straight as possible when braking. You see me locking up because I just turned in way too early. You want to have a late apex for this corner. I took a kind of a mid apex, but it worked out for me because I kept the momentum going. When you go for this late apex, be a bit faster on the throttle out of the corner. It's going to be really difficult, because apparently the Pirelli tires, slick tires, are made of ice, so you don't have any traction right here. Again, racing line you can see very clearly right here, not as clear on the exit of this corner, so you're going to know that there is going to be a hill. Maybe that's why you are going to spin out so often. Just make sure to be really careful with the throttle out of this corner. You would rather be a bit slow than to almost spin out and need to recover that. Then when you get a good exit up to 4th, then on this right-hander, just keep as close to the right as possible. Then coming to spoon, after the 50 meter board, just throwing the car in to spoon. You can keep it in 6th, but I keep it in 5th because of a bit more extra rotation and a bit more pull when I actually go on the throttle again. You want to place the car on this curb right here to give you a better entry angle for spoon, which is going to be much more beneficial, especially because I just steered in way too early. If I'd taken that more outside approach, I would have probably gotten this late apex. I just turned in way too early, which cost me a full tenth. Your apex is going to be just where that green AstroTurf on the inside on the grass starts, just make sure to that as your apex. Actually, it's not green, it's gray. You can again see the racing line very clearly right here, not as clear right there, so you're going downhill. Again, weight trans is going to be very difficult, but with the high downforce setup that I am using in this hot lap, you can easily go flat out just after you pass this hill right here. And as soon as your rear or like your whole car gets straight, you can basically go flat out, which is going to suck because on the straight you're not going to be as fast as the people that are running, let's say 2.7, but we're going to call and talk after this lap about the setup and what changes you can make. Then for 130R, completely flat corner, not even a tiny speck of braking or lifting off. You want to keep left right here. Gives you a couple of hundreds. Obviously, you're going to not be able to load up your tires for the last chicane, but in my opinion, you gain more time than you lose time if you just take the close left line. Then, for the last chicane, 125 meters, rapidly downshifting, engine braking to your advantage, then completely abusing all of those curbs right here, up to third on the second curb. Then be really careful not to go out on those curbs because they can spin your wheels. Then it's also really important to keep your car as straight as possible, as you're steering as smooth as possible, because you can easily spin your rear if you apply the steering inputs too early, and you can also just scrape off too much if you are not smooth enough with your steering. So then get as close to the wall right here to get you some more hundreds. Again, as I said in the beginning, you want to have the shortest amount of distance between you and the finish line when you're when you're finishing the not starting the lap, but when you're finishing the lap. Then, as we're coming over the start finish, it's a 125.4. Again, just to reiterate, most of the corners are on-cambered corners, especially the S's. Then we're talking about Degner 2. The hairpin is also heavily on-cambered, so you want to stay on the inside of that as well. Spoon is also really, really difficult corner. The chicane also on traction, you need to be really, really careful. Then next up, we're going to talk about the setup. Talking about the setup now, you can already see I have a high downforce setup. You can change it at the ride height. I'm running a 3.4 ride height, which you can change to 2.4, and you can then in turn reduce the front wing to get you a bit more straight line speed, because this setup is going to suck in the straight line because you have so much downforce on it. Transmission 52, 57 just helps with the rear stepping out and the S's, makes it really controllable. If you still have some problems, go with 53%, but not more than that, because I felt like after 53%, your car is going to be very, very just understeery. Then going to suspension geometry, right, left, left. Just the usual kind of deal. Then suspension 1834. You can increase the front anti-roll to 2 to make it a bit more stable. Again, front right height, you can reduce that to 2.4. So you have a 2.7 or 3.7 setup on the wings. Then brakes 150, and tires are all on the minimum tire pressures, obviously. You would want to watch out to not push your car too hard in the race, because obviously on high fuel loads and soft tires, your car or the front and rear tires are going to overheat very, very quickly through the S's, especially if you're running a high downforce setup. So make sure not to push 100%, because if you have cooler tires, you can push more throughout the lap instead of just the S's. No one can overtake you into Degner 1 or 2. The only real place where you can get overtaken is hairpin and the last chicane, most likely in turn 1, if you got the DRS and a good run out of the last chicane. So just make sure not to push too hard through the S's and keep the tire temperature as low as possible. Thank you all for watching. I hope you have learned something. I'm Fraser, and I hope we will see each other on the racetrack.